Hello everyone and welcome to our webinar series. We are going to talk during three webinars. We're going to talk about skin anatomy and functioning. So these webinars are part of the level 1 part 1 of the Daata program, which is a method based on pet dermatology and cosmetology. To talk a little bit about what Daata is, I developed this method because I really feel like grooming should be based on science, and we touch skin and hair of pet every day, and we should know what we're doing with it. So we should know the science behind everything we do when we groom a pet. So if it is the first time for you that you participate in our webinars, I'm going to explain to you how it's going to work. So this has been recorded before and it's streamed on the Facebook Live, and I'm in front of my computer if you're watching it live, and I will answer all your questions. There is two ways you can ask your question. You can first write them as we watch the video, and I will reply writing in the comments, or you can wait until the end of the seminars where there will be a question and answer session. So any question you have, feel free to drop it. Today we are going to talk about the skin. We're going to do the introduction of our level 1 part 1. So maybe you didn't have a chance to watch the mini video I made before about the skin, so I will just say again a few important notions to make sure everyone is starting with the same information. So the skin. The skin is in pets and every mammals actually the largest organ of the body. In an adult dog, for example, it can represent between 12% to 16% of the live weight. Can be roughly different, slightly different according to the breeds, but roughly it's going to be 12 to 16% of the live weight. In a newborn puppy, it's 24%. 24% of the live, so a quarter of a puppy is the skin. In dogs and cats, it is most entirely covered with hair, except on very small parts of the body, which are the nose, the pads, the mucous membranes. What is the skin for? The skin is there to prevent everything that is inside to go out and everything that is outside to get in. It is a protection. It protects the organs, the inside organs, the entrails. It covers the entire body and gives the body its shapes and contours. Its elasticity allows movement. The skin also protects against ultraviolet and against allergens and microorganisms. The skin is also a very good mirror of the pet's health. Indeed, if you do not have a good skin condition, it reveals that there is a health issue. Might be minor, it may be serious, but there is an issue that makes the skin unhealthy. The surface of the skin is also covered with what is called the flora. You can see that flora like the inhabitants of the skin. Skin is like a small planet, just like Earth, where there is an atmosphere in which all the inhabitants of the planet can breathe in. It's the same for the skin. There is a flora, there is inhabitants on the skin, and they are balanced when the skin is healthy. So you have some microorganisms in majority and some microorganisms in minority. And the glands of the skin will create an atmosphere with mainly what is called the sebum or the lipidic layer. And in this layer, in the sebum, these microorganisms can breathe properly. If this atmosphere is well balanced, then there will be the right amount of each microorganism. If for any reason this atmosphere is unbalanced, then the flora will be unbalanced, and if it is unbalanced, then the skin is unhealthy. As a groomer, we do need to understand how this barrier works to protect it, to preserve it, not to disturb it too much when we groom it, and to make sure we keep it healthy. In a way, we can also help if we know really how it works properly. In some cases, we will be able to help the skin restore its balance, or we will help to maintain a healthy skin, or prevent an unhealthy skin from degrading too much. The skin is a complex organ, very complex. First of all, it comprises of several layers. Most of the time you will hear that the skin comprises of 3 layers, but this is not scientifically correct, anatomically correct. The skin comprises of 2 layers, namely the epidermis and the dermis, and a third element called sometimes the hypodermis, which I call the subcutis, is not part of the skin, is underneath, but we need to know what it is and how it works to understand fully how skin works. So we will study also the subcutis. So the epidermis first is the first layer of the skin. It's very dense, but it's very thin. It is the thinnest part of the skin, the thinnest layer. It comprises itself of different layers as well, and it is not vascularized. There is no blood vessel in the epidermis. The dermis itself do not comprise of several layers, more of an amorphous stems and fibers. It is very thick. It's the thickest layer of the skin. So the dermis is vascularized. There is a lot of blood vessels traveling in it and going right at the top of it, and right underneath the epidermis. The subcutis lies deeper underneath the skin, and it comprises of what we can call bags of fat, literally, that will stock vitamins, chemicals, etc. And each of these 3 elements work together to keep the skin healthy. The basement membrane is also called a dermal-epidermal junction. It is also called sometimes epidermal basal lamina or epidermal basement membrane. So we're just going to call it basement membrane. It separates the dermis and the epidermis, and it glues it together. So you can see the basement membrane literally as a glue layer. And it's gonna have several functions. First of all, it is a physical-chemical barrier. It means that basically any chemical that enters from the outside through the epidermis is stopped by this membrane, so it will not go into the dermis, because if it enters the dermis, then it enters the blood system. It is also a nutrient-oriented circulation, which means that basically it allows the dermis to send nutrients to nourish the epidermis. So it's a one-way road. This membrane also has a function in the immune system. If something attacks this membrane, then it will contact, if I can say that, the immune system, and the immune system will give the appropriate answer. If this membrane is deteriorated, it can lead to very serious issues such as, for example, skin cancer. So the study of this membrane for the moment is really at the beginning. So there is still a lot to discover about it, but we already know that if this membrane is deteriorated, it can lead to very serious skin issues, as I mentioned, like skin cancer, but also renal issues, for example. Which is understandable actually, because if you deteriorate the membrane, then you give access to the system, to the blood system, and then to the internal organs. So this means that you need to be very careful with the chemicals you use on the skin. If you use a very strong one, if you do not dilute your products properly, or if you use certain dangerous chemicals on it, then you can deteriorate this membrane. And on the short to long term, you can cause very, very serious health issue to the pet. Which is why you should always know what you are putting on the skin. Actually, in all level 3 data groomers learn how to read the ingredient list, for example, and learn what every chemical is for and what are the secondary effects of them. So that's not the subject today. But for the moment, if you are not able to do it, I suggest you simply follow the manufacturer directions. Read the bottles, read the security data sheets as well, the safety data sheets. Normally, if it's done properly, it will indicate you, for example, which dilution ratio are safe for the skin. Now let's talk about the epidermis. The epidermis is, as I mentioned before, the superficial layer of the skin. So that's here. It is the one that is exposed to the external aggressions. Unlike the dermis, it does not contain any blood vessels. It is not vascularized. It's there to protect the dermis against the external aggressions. So as I mentioned before, this layer is very thin. How thin is it? If we talk about the dogs, in hairy parts of the skin, this layer is 30 to 95 microns thin. Very, very thin. It represents less than 1/10 a millimeter. Where there is no hair, it will be a bit thicker. And the epidermis and the skin in general is even thinner in cats, being thinner in females than in males. So it can be 12 to 45 microns thin, 25 being the average for a cat. So if you want to compare with humans, for example, our epidermis is 6 millimeters thick, which is much thicker than cats and dogs. Also, note that according to the breed, then the skin will be more or less thick. For example, the skin of the Labrador is thicker than the one of the Beagle, for example, and thicker than one of the Yorkshire. I've noticed during my studies that actually when a breed has a purpose of going into the water, then the skin is most of the time much thicker than other breeds. The most numerous cells you can encounter in the epidermis are called the keratinocytes. So they are here and they lie on the basement membrane. And what will happen is that they will progressively be pushed up because new ones are forming. And the higher they go, they slowly die and flatten until they create the stratum corneum, which is the most superficial layer of the epidermis. And this part of the epidermis is the denser one, very, very dense, and very, like a shield, really, that creates the shield. The keratinocytes will migrate progressively through 4 or 5 layers in the epidermis depending on the anatomical area. And it takes 21 to 28 days in a healthy pet to go from the basement membrane to the top of the skin and then exfoliate. When this desquamation process lasts 21 to 28 days, meaning that it's a normal one, then you will not notice anything. The dead cells will be evacuated of the coat naturally without noticing. But if for some reasons there is a health issue, an allergy, food allergy for example, a wound, any kind of genetic disease, anything, then it might happen that this lapse of time reduces. If it does, it means that it goes up faster, and then the skin is not able to exfoliate properly without noticing. And this is how dandruffs were born. This is how you see the dandruffs appearing in the coat. So here is the epidermis with more details. So as I said, this is the basement membrane or basal membrane if you want. Underneath is the dermis, and over it is the epidermis. The epidermis most of the time comprises of 4 layers, which is the basal layer, the thorny layer, the granular layer, and the stratum corneum. In the foot pad and the callus areas of the skin, you have a 5th layer, which lies between the stratum corneum and the granular layer, and it's called the clear layer. So on most of the skin, you only have 4. And you can see they go up and they progressively die and flatten until they form the stratum corneum. Keratinocytes also produce different substances that will defend the body. It will play a role in healing and also in fighting against infectious agents or external aggressions. So here is an epidermis underneath the microscope. So you can see here the stratum basal. Here, so you can see very round and healthy keratinocytes. And the more they progress up to the stratum corneum, they flatten and then create like lines of flattened dead keratinocyte to create keratin. Other cells are present in the epidermis together with the keratinocytes. First of all, the Langerhans cells. Langerhans cells are there to recognize different pathogens. Basically, they are like little soldiers of the immune system. They lie in the epidermis, and if a pathogen enters the epidermis, these cells will move, catch it, bring it to the immune system to give information so the immune system can respond. Then you have the Merkel cells. Merkel cells are nerve receptors, and they are attached to the nerve endings. Nerves are situated in the dermis, and they come to the basement membrane, and on the basement membrane at the bottom of the epidermis you have the Merkel cells. We don't know a lot about Merkel cells yet. We know they do have an importance in the way we feel, the sensation, but actually scientists have discovered that if you remove them, then the sensation is not different. So basically, for the moment, they know they probably have another role, another purpose, but they don't know what it is yet. And then you have the melanocytes. Melanocytes allow pigmentation of skin and hair. This is what gives the color. They produce melanin, and this melanin is what colors the skin and hair. Melanocytes create two types of melanin, two types of pigments, and with these two pigments, with these two colors, the genes are capable of creating all the pets' color, all the dogs and cats' color you know. The first melanin that is created is called eumelanin. Eumelanin is the black pigment. The first color is black. All black areas on a dog or a cat is the result of eumelanin production by the melanocytes. However, some genes will alter the color of the pigment. So from the black, the gene can create blue, brown and light brown. How come? For the blue is created with what is called a dilution gene. So basically, dilution means that the gene will send less color in the hair. And because there is less pigment, then the color is light and becomes what we call gray or blue. For the brown, it's a bit different. Actually, brown is a gene that will change the structure of the black pigment. Basically, it means that the shape of the pigment changes. And because the shape changes, we see the black pigment brown. And then when you have light brown, basically it's both. You have the change of structure because you have the brown, and at the same time, you also have a dilution gene which will send less brown in the hair, and because there is a less color sent, then it's diluted and it will give a light brown. For example, this cat is black. This cat is totally black actually, but you have this half with a solid black color, and on this hair there is a gene that says to dilute it, and then you have the blue. We can have also a mix of solid colors and diluted colors. For example, we have Merle, which is quite the famous one, very popular at the moment. Merle is a bit of a tricky gene, because actually you can have a dog that is Merle, but you don't know it. You can't see it. So you will see that dog with no Merle coat, but actually genetically it can be Merle. This is called a cryptic gene, cryptic Merle. So basically like a ghost Merle that does not show. So the tricky stuff here is that if you're a breeder, or if you want to breed your shepherd with a Merle and your dog is not Merle, you need to DNA test this dog to make sure it's not cryptic and it doesn't have an hidden Merle gene. So still talking about eumelanin, eumelanin colors also the eyes and the nose. So the more eumelanin the genes are capable to produce, the darker the eyes, the darker the nose. Most of dogs and cats have brown eyes, but if they do not produce a lot of eumelanin, or if they have the dilution gene, for example, they can have blue eyes, very light yellow eyes, etc., etc. Green as well. And the iris is colored by superposition of layers, pigment layers. So the more layers the body is capable of sending into the eyes, the darker the eyes will be. So as I told you, there is two colors. The second one is the red, which is called, the red melanin is called pheomelanin. So I'm talking about the very deep red, like in the Irish setters. And of course, this melanin can be diluted as well. So you're going to have a light red. This melanin only colors the skin and hair. It never goes in the nose and it never goes in the eyes. So you can have a very, very deep red dog with a very light nose and very light eyes. Which is why when you have a red breed, if you read the standards, most of the time they will state that light color in the eyes or the nose do not matter, as long as the coat itself is really deep red. So with black and red, nature is capable of creating all the colors you know in dogs and cats. But there is also the white. What about the white coats? Actually, white is not a color. White is an absence of color. It means that basically the gene do not order the melanocyte to send any pigment in the hair or skin. It does not mean that the pet do not have a color, genetic color. It just means that it does not show. But there is another type of white. The other white is created by an extreme dilution of the red pigment. Sometimes the pheomelanin is so diluted that it appears white to the eye. And if you look at a dog, which is actually red, but so diluted that it looks white, you will see some shadow, some creamy red shadow at the tail here or on the ears. Pigmentation genes do two things. First of all, they will determine the color of the skin and of the coat. And for that, they will distribute a certain amount of black pigment or red pigment. Sometimes the genes can order to change the way they distribute the color. So for example, they will change from black to red, or from red to black, or from nothing to black, or from black to nothing. This is how you get the tipped, for example, or ticked coats. So some coats will have a length of white hair, and just at the top of the hair, the tip will be black, or red, or blue, etc., etc. Sometimes the genes will order to change, to swap from black to red, and black again, and red again. So you're going to have some stripes on the hair, black, red, black, red, black, red. And this is, you're going to have, with this you're going to have what is called agouti. This is an agouti. An agouti is a little rodent called the agouti, and the name of this rodent gave the name to the color. If you look at this coat, and if you take one hair, you will see the stripes of color. And this exists in rabbits as well, in mice, but you also have agouti in cats, like the Somalian, for example, the Somali cat or the Abyssinian. This is a protection, first of all, in rodents against predators. So with this color, they are able to hide more easily in nature. It is also a disguise for predators, because if they are well disguised in nature, then the rodents or the prey will not see them dissimulated. So it's a camouflage, basically. And some dogs also have, in Nordic breeds mainly, or wolf-like breeds, you're gonna have some agility as well. As we're talking about pigmentation, let's talk about the red and black cats. Red and black cats, this one is a particular one. It's a chimera, so we're going to talk about it later. But you probably heard when you talk about red and black cats that all red and black cats are females. Or sometimes what is said is tricolor cats are females. It is not quite true. I would say nearly all of them are females, and the rest of them are not males either. I know it's a bit confusing, but now let me explain that. The red color in cats only depends on the X gene. So when you have a male, so you probably know already, then if we talk about chromosomes, if we are female, we are XX, and if we're male, we are XY. Because the red color depends only on the X gene, if you're a male, your eyes are red or your eyes are not red. If there is one X, so the X say yes or no, and that's it. If you're a female, there is the first possibility, there is three possibilities. First one, both X will say no red. Then, if there is no red on the X, then the gene will go and search for a color in the other genes. And then will show blue, brown, black, etc. Then there is another possibility, which is very rare. Both X say yes. So this is yes for orange, if I can say that, red, and yes for red. If it's this way, then the female is red. And there is a third possibility. And then it means that one X say yes to red, and the other say no, no red. And each follicle, each hair, respond to one of the X randomly. All the hair that do respond to the X that say yes, we are orange or we're red, then the hair will be red. All the hair that respond to the gene that say no red will then show the other color, the black or the blue if it's diluted, etc. For this cat specifically, this is not a question of XX. This cat is a chimera. Basically, this cat is two cats. At some stage, in the wands during the development of the embryos, one died and has been absorbed by his sibling. So if both cats were females, then you're going to have XXX cats. Instead of having two genes, two chromosomes, it's going to have three, XXX. And sometimes this chimera can be XXY if there was a merging of a female and a male together. These chimeras are not female or male, they are nothing. They are sterile. They cannot breed. So basically this will happen one time of 500. So for 500 tricolor cat you have one chimera. But the chimeras are not always black and red, because if the two puppies or if the two kittens were black, then the chimera will be black. And then just there is only a DNA test that can say if it's a chimera or not. So almost all red and black cats are females, except when it's chimeras. And dogs can also be chimeras, same process. In the wands, two embryos merge together, and then you can have, for example, a Labrador, black and sand. Sometimes the merging in the wands does not happen at the same time of development. So for example, what I'm saying is that one embryo dies very early, do not develop, stays there for a while all the other embryos develop. And it's just a little amount of cells that stay there. And then later, while all the other embryos developed much bigger, one of them absorbed the cells. This is called somatic cells. So instead of having a whole chimera, you just have actually a patch of the sibling here, because it was just a few cells that merged with a bigger embryo. So it's the same process than chimera, but a different stage. As a groomer, it is very important to know something about pigmentation, is that pigmentation has a purpose. The purpose of pigmentation is to protect against the sun rays, which means that the more pigmented the skin, the more protected it is against the sun. So when you have, what does that mean? When you have a light skin, the shorter you clip it, the more you expose it to the sun rays. From this perspective, it is very important to know, if you groom cats, that actually all the pigmentation in cats goes directly into the hair. Most of it. So basically, in the skin, there is nearly no pigment, so no protection against the sun. Which is why when you clip a cat very short, you have to inform the customer that they should keep the cat inside, protected from the direct sunlight. If you expose a cat to sun rays after a very short clip, it can die, especially if it's a hot weather, of course. So it is important that you understand that when you clip a dog very short, the lighter it is, the more it will be exposed to the sun rays and the more it can burn under the sun. So if you have to clip very short a dog, then you have to inform your customer to protect the skin, to protect the pet against direct sunlight. Of course, there's exceptions, because some skin, and the main example I can give you is the poodle, the standard poodle. When the skin is exposed to sunlight, it will not burn, it will tan. It will become a dark grey, which is why white standard poodles are clipped really, really short on the nose and all the clipped parts. And because normally what they're looking for is for a contrast between this very white coat and this really pigmented skin. So why is hair color so important for the group? Actually, depending on the color of the coat, the texture of the coat will be different. The texture of each hair will be different. So hair texture changes with color. So here we have the solid colors. We have the black, the red, and the brown. And here we have the dilutions. So we have light black, so blue or gray. We have light brown, and we have light red. Talking about black and red solid, when you have a solid black or red hair, this hair will be really straight. It will be thicker and smoother. Talking about the brown one, when you have a brown hair, compared to the black and red solid, this brown hair will be a little bit thinner and a little bit wavier. And then when we go to diluted colors will be even more thinner, will be even thinner and even wavier. And what does that imply for a groomer? The thinner and the wavier the hair is, the easier it will mat. Because it's thin, so it's lighter, so it flies more easily. And because it's wavy, it catches each other more easily. So if you have two dogs, for example, living in the same house and receiving the same routine of brushing, bathing, grooming, etc., like every 2 months. Let's say, for example, they go to grooming every 2 months. So one is black, one is grey. And they're the same breed and they receive the same treatment from the owner and the same amount of grooming from the groomers. Every 2 months, this grey dog will be a mess. And every 2 months, this black dog will be perfect. Easy to demat, easy to groom. And this one will be a mess and we'll have to clip it, for example. This is because the hair is much thinner and much wavier that it needs to be groomed more frequently. So knowing the colors will allow you to know that, for example, if you have a black dog with a normal lifestyle, then for example this dog or this cat can come every 2 months, no problem, every 8 weeks. But with the same environment and the same way of life, another color, like brown or diluted, will have to come more often. So this is why knowing your color is important to establish, first of all, a good schedule, a good grooming schedule for each customer. And also to understand why sometimes, well, you have some dogs that are a total mess because they're diluted and maybe you didn't know that, and now you understand that, well, oh, okay, this dog was diluted, this is why he's always a mess, although the owner brushes him at home and it comes every 8 weeks to the groomer. Now let's talk about another tricky part. What about the white hair then? We've seen that the white hair is an absence of color, but it's not an absence of color in the genes. It's an absence of color to the eyes. You don't see the color because there is no melanin scent in the hair. But still, because there is a genetic color, the hair texture will depend on this genetic color. So you can have two white dogs, same breed, same maintenance, same grooming schedule, but because one of them is genetically black and the other is genetically blue, then this second one will be a mess every 2 months and the other one will be a dream to groom. So when you have a white dog, the trick is to determine what is the genetic color so you can establish the right grooming schedule. For kittens, for example, for cats, if you have a white cat, you can ask the owner if he remembers a little color spot when the cat was a kitten. Because most of the time, all white cats were not born all white. They sometimes have a little patch of color around the ears or somewhere on the head most of the time. This color patch will tell you what is the genetic color and will help you to determine the grooming schedule. I think this first course has showed you how important it is to know the science behind your job. There is a lot of science behind grooming. There is a lot of science. There is pet dermatology, there is anatomy, there is behavior, there is cosmetology. Plenty of stuff you need to know to be more professional, or worse, to be a professional. If you don't know the science behind, then how can you answer all the whys of a customer or your own why? All the whys you've asked yourself, they have an answer and you should know it because you're a professional. Now, for example, in this course, you have the answer to why is this black dog easier to groom than this grey one? Or why there is a difference in coat in two same breeds and two white dogs. Same breed but different type of coat. Now you have the answer. And when you have the answers for yourself, then you have the answers for the customer. and you appear more professional, and because you appear more professional, you gain their trust. And in the same time, you earn more money because this professionalism has a price. I hope this course was interesting enough for you, and I will see you in a few days for the next one. And in the next course, we will talk about hair and coat. The next one will be a bit longer, and I'm pretty sure you will find it really, really interesting. So thank you very much. And now let's reply to all your questions. Thank you.